Hello, hello, hello! What's happening, everybody? MCOC Droid does back again for another video on Marvel Contest of Champions. Today, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So with yesterday's level up event, I just crossed over the 700,000 base hero rating mark, which I thought was pretty cool. And I want to do an account overview video at some point. That won't be this video, obviously, based on the title. But I do want to do that, so be on the lookout for that over the next few days. But another kind of account-related video that a few people have been asking me for, in particular, Lord Leximus is one for sure. So shout out to you, my friend. Good suggestion. And if you haven't already, hit him up on YouTube. He has a channel as well, so make sure you check him out, drop him a sub, like his videos, all that stuff. But I've been getting some other people asking as well about my mastery setup and what I do, on a day-to-day basis. So I figured I would not pull up titles. That's silly. I should hit the other button that actually says mastery. And I figured I would kind of go over all of my masteries and what I think is important, not important. I'm not going to go over every single one, but I do want to talk about the ones that I particularly use and always have, even when I have to, maybe switch up my builds based on content that I'm doing or future content that I will do, etc., etc. So of course, once you hit level 60 and, you get through all of the Act 4 content, you have a max of 59 points that you can work with. So as you can see, I've got 27 in offense, 16 in both defense and utility. And I figure before I get started, let me throw out kind of a standard disclaimer when it comes here. These, of course, are my opinions when it comes to the masteries. You may think totally different from me. You may think exactly the same, maybe somewhere in between. So, I'll do an early shout out down below. Feel free to comment on your thoughts on how my mastery setup is, what you do differently, etc., etc. But the other kind of standard disclaimer to throw out there is that there is no one perfect mastery build, Everyone is going to be different in terms of their play style and particularly in terms of their roster, Like you may have a bunch of heavy mutant champs as your strongest champs, or maybe it's a lot of bleeders, or maybe it's a lot of armor related champions, whatever it is. Everyone has their own individual roster, their own individual playstyle, and their own point of the game that they're currently at in terms of content that's done, content that's yet to be done. So again, this is my build, but of course yours may differ slightly, or it may differ completely different. There's probably a better way of saying that, of course, but it is what it is, and so take it with a grain of salt. Again, you may agree, you may not, but here we are. So again, just kind of going over the points as a whole. As you can see, I'm a much more offense focused player than defense, and then utility is right there as well. But as my roster has grown, as my playstyle has evolved over the years playing this game, I definitely have put more of a focus on offense versus defense. And so that's why you can see the vast majority of points, almost half of the points that you can have, are in offense for me. So let me go over this build real fast. First and foremost, with strength and greater strength, of course you have to put points into these in order to unlock this middle or this upper section right here. So bare minimum, of course, you have to put in 1 into strength and 1 into greater strength. In my opinion, it's not really worth putting more than 1 into strength ever. It's, as you can see, the attack rating increase is a flat numerical value from 6 all the way up to 33 at max level, which is really not that much, especially as your roster evolves. So if you're going to put more points into these two masteries, it's much better to put them into greater strength, because as you can see, it's percentage based and it tops out at 8% if you put in all 9 points. So as your roster evolves, as you get stronger 4-star champions, 5-star champions, 6-star champions, as their base attack rating is getting higher and higher as you're ranking them up, this greater strength mastery will affect you more than the regular strength mastery. Me, as you can see, I've got 3 points in here. I think it's a good middle ground. It's a nice little attack bump, 2.4%. Particularly with my stronger 5 stars and my couple of 6 stars. It's a good jump. But in my opinion, it's not worth putting in more than 3, just because you can get much more value from, putting those other points into other masteries. Real fast, courage. I've got it here as 1 point. It's a nice little help. When you're below 50% health, you do get that attack boost, which is nice, 10%. You could put in more, but again, since I focus more on attack versus defense, and, I'm doing my best not to get hit, not to take damage, ending the fights quicker by focusing more on attack. For me, personally, having 1 point in there is good. Having more than 1 point in there is just not needed, worth it, etc., etc. So, I left it at that. Pierce, I really enjoy, especially these days. There are a fair number of champions that have armor up related abilities, but then, in terms of Alliance War, in, a lot of the Act 4 and Act 5 nodes, there are a lot of armor ups, armor boosts, armor strength, whatever you want to call it, nodes in that content. So even if the champion itself doesn't have any sort of armor up related abilities, those nodes will add on to it. So for me, maxing out Pierce is super helpful. As you can see there, so I get critical hits from your champs ignore an additional 15% armor, which is great. That is, you'll see your base hits doing so little damage, and then whenever you can throw a crit, and we'll talk about that in a second, seeing that huge attack jump is nice, and able to, again, end those fights faster, which in my opinion is where the importance is at. Rather than trying to, minimize damage as much as possible on yourself, just moving forward with attacks. So something like Pierce is incredibly helpful, especially when you pair it with the 2 precision related masteries, lesser precision and precision itself. Now again, I treat lesser precision as just another stepping stone, which is why you can see I've got 1 point in there, just so I could get precision unlocked. And that I have maxed out, and I pretty much always keep maxed out. It's a much better numerical value than lesser precision, as you can see. Even just at rank 2, where you get 170 points of critical rating, that's more than maxing out lesser precision at 125. So again, it's not really, if you want to obviously have as much chance for crits as possible, sure, you could also put more points into lesser precision, but in my opinion, it's not worth it. Throw the 1 in there, you're good, that gets precision up and running, and put all 5 points in there. The more crits you're doing, the better. Regardless of the rest of your critical damage related masteries, no matter who you're using, the more crits you're doing, the better. So get that up. It doesn't have to be the first mastery that you max out, but it's definitely an important one to max out when you can. In terms of critical damage rating, these are the 2 that I probably should be doing more with. It's probably the biggest part of any of the masteries where I'm lacking. I'm definitely lacking. As you can see, I've actually never even gotten around to unlocking cruelty. And so I would treat these as the same, do lesser cruelty as a stepping stone, just put the 1 point in, and then put in as much cruelty as you can. I probably will at some point, and for now, in fact, I'll probably take off this lesser cruelty, because it's not really that much of a boost, and use that point elsewhere. But at some point, I think I probably will unlock cruelty, and at least put a couple of points in. But, as you can see, it definitely has a nice boost once you get even all the way to rank 5 right there. So it's definitely recommended, especially if you're putting a lot into the critical chance masteries. So it would be a good one. For me, though, a lot of my champions are revolving around Furies. You have Medusa, you have Hela, you have Star-Lord, along with some others. So for me, at the very least, Extended Fury is, I won't say it's essential, but it's pretty close to being essential. And which is why not only do I have points in it, but I've got it maxed out. Getting those extra 0.8 seconds for the stacks of Furies can be incredibly helpful at times. Whether it's Medusa and you're trying to build up the Furies, or keep the Furies on her, to be doing more damage, to be able to auto block potentially. Whether it's Hela, you're trying to keep the Furies alive so that you can rebuild your spirits so they never expire. Star-Lord, trying to continue to build up your power meter and hopefully, throw a special 2 or a special 3 while a Fury is active to get even more damage. It's always worth it for me, which is why, like I said, I have it maxed out. For Enhanced Fury, it's a little bit less essential. I'd much rather keep the Furies alive than try and boost them up in terms of their strength. So that's why I've got 2 points in there instead of maxing it out. But it is another helpful one. Again, when you have someone like Medusa, when you have someone like Hela, who can build up a bunch of Furies and to get them very strong on their own, this mastery, getting them even stronger, is a nice boost, I will admit. But I've got it at 2. I think I'll pretty much never have it more than that, but the 4% is a nice touch. The 6 class-related masteries, 2 here, 2 defense, 2 utility. Again, you take them with a grain of salt. Pure skill, of course, has its own kind of, not controversy, but problems surrounding it. It's kind of been bugged for a while, of course, pretty much ever since they introduced diminishing returns. So that's why, as you can see, I don't have any points in it. I could and probably should put a point or 2 in there. It would obviously help, my Blade and some other top champs that I have. But for now, I'd rather just spread the points around elsewhere. Mutagenesis doesn't seem worth it. I mean, yes, I've got Archangel as a high-up champion, but, I'd much rather focus on not getting hit, so not getting bled, rather than trying to close the bleed wounds quicker. And again, it would only be good for mutants anyway, so in my opinion, this one just really isn't worth it at all. The suicides up top here on a day-to-day basis, as you can see, I don't have them activated at all. I particularly really only used them when I was going for my legend runs. And I do want to talk about that build, and that'll be a separate vid. I do want to do a how did I get it? And a lot of it has to do with those masteries and, a couple of others. So, it's sort of buyer beware with them. They can obviously be very effective in certain situations, and particularly with certain champs, especially if you have, a champ that's bleed immune, poison immune, or even both would make it, of course, even better. You get the attack boosts without taking the bleed or poison damage. But obviously most champions are not bleed and or poison immune, so, it will hurt you, but it'll also help you. So, I know this is the biggest one where some people are super for using them and super against using them. Like I said, on a day-to-day basis, I just never use them. Now this newer set of 4 down here, these are also interesting to talk about. Despair, as you can see, I've got 1 point in there, mostly because you have to put 1 point in there to unlock these others. I could put in more. Obviously, this is a great mastery to use, particularly with Void or any other debuff heavy champs that you may have towards the top of your roster. But for me, for where I'm at, 1 point is good. It's, you can boost it up to 10 and 15%, as you can see there, by putting in more points. But it's a good enough start, and like I said, it is a stepping stone for some of these others. Unfazed, I don't use at all. I know some people swear by it and they really like it. I think it's interesting, but again, maybe not worth the points, and I'd rather spread it around to elsewhere. Deep Wounds, on the other hand, again, based on your roster, and if you have, any strong bleed heavy champions towards the top of your roster. Of course, I'm talking about Blade, I'm talking about Archangel, Gwenpool, Drax, some of the others. This is absolutely an essential mastery to have. I've got it at 4. I could easily put in the final point. Once I unlock it, it is definitely worth it, just again based on my roster. It just helps put out so much extra damage, whether with the bleeds are lasting longer, the instantly striking down a certain percentage of your enemy's max health. Yeah, it's just, without question, once you start getting some bleed heavy champions, you gotta put points into Deep Wounds. It'll only make them, so much stronger than they already are. Assassin, another good one to have, and particularly good when you're up against final bosses, whether it's Act 5, whether it's Labyrinth of Legends, or some other difficult content. This really kicks in and comes into play most when you're up against champions with a lot of health. So those are the biggest situations where that would happen, but it can apply anywhere, of course. I've got 1 point in. You could easily make the argument to do more, especially if you're, say, running a path of Labyrinth of Legends, or you're doing a Legends run. But for me, again, for a day-to-day basis, I think 1 point in there is pretty solid. But, I might be swayed to put 1 more point in there, just to kind of help get that extra boost. All right, so moving on to the defense tab. Once again, vitality, greater vitality, treated exactly the same way as strength. You have to put points into both to get other masteries unlocked. So same deal, I've got 1 in vitality, and coincidentally enough, I also have 3 in greater vitality, like I did with strength. Like I said, I treat it exactly the same way. That 2.4% health boost is nice. You could go for more, and again, it tops out at 8%, just like greater strength does. And again, if you're going to put points in these between the two of them, it's much better to do greater vitality because it is percentage based. But same deal. 3 is good in my opinion. You could do more, especially if you're running some of those suicide masteries that reduce your health as it increases your attack. So that could kind of help counterbalance it a little bit. But for me, on a day-to-day basis, 3 is good. Moving up to these health-related, or I should say recovery, regeneration-related masteries. Salve, or Salve, if you want to pronounce that hard L. Again, for me particularly, I treat this also as a stepping stone. The reason why I say that is, as your roster gets stronger, again, you're ranking up your 4 stars, your 5 stars, your 6 stars at some point down the road. Their base health is going to get higher and higher because they're simply getting stronger. So even if you max this out and you have it at 4 health points twice per second for 60 seconds. And even if you max this out, which I'll talk about in a second, maxing out recovery, at most that's still 5 points of health twice per second for 60 seconds. Once you start getting champions that have, 15, 20, 25,000 health points, that 5 health per tick is really not going to do all that much for you. Even as you go fight from fight to fight, if you're not taking damage, you're still not recovering that much. So early on, yes, I would put more points into this just to be able to help that health recovery every single fight. But I would argue, once you start getting more towards endgame and your champions do have higher base health rating, I think this salve becomes less and less important to have more than 1 point in. Recovery, on the other hand, you should 100% maximize. Again, it doesn't have to be the first one that you max out with 3 points, but it definitely is important to do so because, again, as you can see there, it increases any health you recover by 15%. So that's anything. So yes, that is salve. That is whatever you can heal back from willpower. But that's also, Dr. Voodoo's regeneration, Wolverine and X-23's regeneration. Any sort of regeneration that happens with the champ, from a node, anything. 15% is a lot of health. So I can't recommend more maxing out recovery whenever you are possible to do so. Again, energy and physical resistances. It's funny, it's kind of similar with the crit damage rating. I should take this 1 point off and put it elsewhere because I don't even have physical resistance unlocked. For me, they're good, and obviously they're helpful if you need to sort of mitigate the damage that you're taking. But as I was mentioning earlier, I am more of an offense-focused player. So for me, these aren't worth it as much. You do get a nice boost as you're, putting more points into these. But I don't think they're worth it as much. You could put a point into both, 1 each, just to increase resistance from essentially all attacks. But in my opinion, they're not as essential. What is more essential, for sure, is block proficiency. Because I mean, no matter who you are, there are going to be times where you need to block. You get trapped in the corner, you miss time to parry, or you miss time to combo, whatever it is. The better your block proficiency is, the less damage you're going to take there. So this you absolutely should max out. Again, whenever you get a chance, at least get a point or two in there to start off with, to start lowering your block damage. But for sure, max this one out. It's a nice backup, so to speak, for, like I said, when you do have to block for more than a hit or two. It really comes in handy. So I definitely recommend that. Perfect block and stand your ground. As you can see, I've got a point in both. I pretty much have 1 point in perfect block solely so that I can do stand your ground, which is much more helpful. Perfect block, again, even if you max it out, it's only a 4% chance to perform a perfect block. So you're not getting a huge jump as you're putting more and more points in. So that's why I think it's just not really worth it more than one. Stand your ground is good to put 1 point in. It's nice. Again, if you trip up and you're about to get hit by a heavy, it's nice to have that 17% chance to resist the block break. And so that way, like if you're fighting with Star-Lord, you get to keep your combo. With anybody else, you get to kind of jump right back in and get your combo back up and running, get your hits back up and running. So it's good to put 1 point in just to give yourself at least that chance. I wouldn't do more than that. If you do, I mean, you really need to put in 4 or 5 points, as you can see, to really see an increase in a chance. At level 2, level 3, you're not really getting that much. Level 5, sure, a 50% chance to resist a block break, that's pretty great, but that's 5 points total. And I just don't think it's really worth it, for me at least, just because I focus more on offense than I do on defense. The 2 defensive class-related ones, Collar Tech, that's kind of cool. When you're fighting with a tech champion, whoever you're fighting against, their power gain is reduced, so that's nice, up to 18% if you max it out, but it's just not really worth it for me. I'd rather put in the points elsewhere. Ditto for Serum Science. Yes, it'd be nice to get that energy resistance, especially as you can see right there, it jumps up nicely from 60 at level 1 to 960 at level 5. That is nice, and maybe it's worth it if you have a science heavy roster, but again, I really wouldn't put any points into it. Willpower, I do have 1 point in there. I think if anything else, for nostalgia's sake. But especially after it got changed a while back, I don't really think it's worth it anymore to have more than 1 point in there. You're really not recovering that much more health per debuff. As you can see, it only goes up to 0.6 and then 0.7%. So 1 is good, and it helps with mitigating at least some of the damage you're taking from anything, whether it's bleed, poison, etc., or armor breaks. The one I love the best is when you have a power lock, a node like that, because then if you don't need to throw any specials and you need to recover some health, once you get to that point and you get the debuff on you, you start recovering health. So you just, don't throw any specials, and for the length of the fight, you're able to recover at least a little bit of health for free, essentially. So I do like that. I do like that. Coagulate and Suture, as you can see, on a daily basis, I don't have any points in. Coagulate was a big one that helped me with my Legend run, and again, I do want to talk about that in a separate video. That was definitely nice to have. Suture, again, it could be worth it as well, but I haven't even unlocked it. But that would help as well, particularly with Legends runs, or if you are running the Suicide Masteries on a more regular basis. Inequity and Resonate, again, they're kind of cool. They're interesting abilities, but again, I don't have them unlocked. As you can see, they're not really important for me, for my account, etc. Moving on to utility, the XP and Gold Masteries. The Gold ones, I would pretty much just never ever do. There's no point. You're not really getting that much, even with the better of the two. The Gold Masteries, as you can see here, it's just better to keep active in the game, to keep doing quests, arena when you can, stuff like that. Because 2%, I think it said, max rank, you get 2% extra gold. That's not really anything, so it's not worth the points. XP, kind of the same deal. Early on, you are leveling up, your player, not champions, of course, but talking about player level ups, you do get those pretty quickly. So maybe you want to throw a point in when you're in the middle, you know, like around level 30, level 40 or so. But again, they're just not really worth it. If you do it, at most put one into wisdom and then put more into intelligence, since again that is percentage based, but in my opinion, not really essential. What is essential, however, are these three I've got here: Limber, Parry, and Stupefy. Any masteries that can either decrease your stun time or increase their stun time are super important, in my opinion, especially when you're doing things like Arena, Alliance War, Duels, you know, any of those modes where you're actually fighting other players with their masteries active as well. It's so key to make sure that you're lowering your stun time as much as possible and increasing their stun time as much as possible. So that's why I've got all three of them maxed out. I highly recommend the same. Of course, you know, Parry in particular, you want to make sure you have at least 1 point in, but you should max that out so that it increases their chance to be stunned even more. Ditto for Stupefy, I would max that out whenever you can. Ditto Limber. I mean, again, you're reducing your stun by 48% when you have this active. That's a lot. So I would highly recommend maxing those out and doing those sooner rather than later. Dexterity, as you can see, I've got 1 point in there. You should definitely have at least 1 point just so that it's actually unlocked and you can dodge projectiles and what have you. You could put in more. The argument is definitely there to put in more because then you get much more crit rating each time. But for now, for the current setup for dexterity, I'm leaving it at 1 point. Petrify is one that I actually might put another point in just to kind of help mitigate the extra recovery that whoever I'm fighting against are getting if I happen to parry them and they have willpower active. So it would help to put a second point in here. 1 is a good start, but you probably should do 2 just to make that that enemy health and power reduction even stronger. Pacify, as you can see, I don't have it unlocked. It is also kind of helpful, but I'm leaving it as is. I don't think I'll probably ever use it, but it would be helpful in certain situations as well. Let me skip real fast to the scouting related masteries. None of them are worth it, particularly not anymore. You know, if you happen to be higher up, even then, like an Alliance War, for every single fight, you do see at the very least the class and the star rating of every champion. So these just aren't needed. Save your points. And lastly, the 2 final class-related masteries. Cosmic Awareness is kind of cool, but again, obviously you can only use them with Cosmic Champions, and it only comes into play if you're fighting someone with armor up. So it's helpful, but not really effective in the grand scheme of things, so I would save your points. Mystic Dispersion, of course, is kind of up in the air right now because there was the recent beta test with potential changes to Mystic Dispersion and Dexterity, excuse me. I'm not going to talk about those, so I'm only going to talk about it as things stand right now. Mystic Dispersion is very essential if you have a lot of Mystic champions in the top tiers of your roster. Obviously, it works wonders in Alliance War defense, but pretty much in anywhere in the game. Now, for me, as you can see, I've got 3 points in there. The argument can be made for 4 or 5 points, but it's also a question of, are you gaining too much power too quickly, particularly if you're trying to specifically throw a special 1 and special 2, and maybe you get too much power all at once and it just skips right ahead. So I've got it at 3. I think that's a nice balance for power gain. I've had it at 4 before, so I kind of bounce back and forth between 3 and 4. So again, it's kind of up to you based on your roster and based on which Mystic champions you're using in which situations. But definitely get at least 2 or 3 points in there if you have a heavy Mystic roster at all. And that's it. That's all the masteries. So hopefully you found this informative. Like I said at the beginning, everyone is going to be different. Your roster, your playstyle, where you're at in the game. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Feel free to comment down below. What do you agree with? What don't you agree with? You know, what do you do maybe totally different from me? you know, I'm always interested in hearing that kind of stuff. So feel free to put that down below. If you enjoyed this video, feel free also to smash that like button, share it around. And if you are so inclined, hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. If you do, be sure to ring the bell so you get notified whenever I go live or whenever new videos are coming up on the channel. Aside from that, thanks very much for watching and listening to me ramble on about masteries for quite a while. Hope you're having a great day or night wherever you may be right now. Take care, and I will see you next time.